The council chamber of Kylan Station pulsed with a low hum, its plasma-lit walls casting jagged shadows across the obsidian table. Sigils of the wolf, phoenix, dragon, and tortoise clans loomed above, their mythic forms a silent rebuke to the chaos below. King Kaeldar sat at the table's head, his silver-white fur taut, amber eyes burning with barely restrained fury. His clawed fingers gripped the armrests, the tension in his muscular frame palpable, as if he might shatter the table to silence the room. Queen Silvara, her crimson fur catching the light like embers, sat beside him, her amethyst eyes sharp but unsteady, her long rabbit-like ears quivering with each raised voice. Princess Lyrian, cloaked to hide her hybrid red-white fur, stood at the table's edge, her gold-violet eyes flickering between her parents and the clan representatives, whose arguments clawed at the air like beasts. The chamber was a crucible of despair. The Beastkin's next generation, frilier, smaller, their neural implants failing, was a specter haunting every word. Kaeldar's tail lashed, a sharp crack against his throne. "Silence," he growled, voice a low thunder that stilled the room. "We bicker over scraps while our children fade. Speak truth, or this council is done." A Phoenix clan elder, her feathers dulled by age, rose, her voice brittle. "The incubators betray us, Majesty. Birth yields drop 30%. The young are weak, bones brittle, minds unstable. We face the end." Silvara's ears twitched, her gaze cutting through the elder. "The incubators are tools. They birth what we command. Why do our commands fail?" She leaned forward, her translucent robes clinging to her lithe frame, her fingers brushing Kaeldar's arm. A fleeting touch that made his fur bristle, his amber eyes darting to her with a flash of something unspoken. The air between them thickened, a silent acknowledgement of their loveless union, strained by duty and loss. Lyrian shifted, her cloak slipping to reveal a glimpse of her hybrid fur. Her voice, soft and trembling, broke the pause. "I see them in nurseries. They don't cry. They don't reach out." Her gold-violet eyes met her mother's, then her father's, searching for answers. "Why don't they feel?" ##### deep dive. The roots of decline. A tortoise clan scientist, his shell chipped and heavy, activated a hologram, a genetic spiral fraying into chaos. "The decline is threefold," he intoned, voice flat, as if reciting a death sentence. "Genetic stagnation, emotional suppression, cultural decay. Each compounds the others. Genetic stagnation, the Beastkin's biomechanical reproduction, born of necessity, was their first misstep. Varathus's plasma storms and predatory megafauna demanded rapid population growth, but natural mating was too slow, too vulnerable. Incubators, drawing from elite genetic templates, promised strength and efficiency. Yet these templates, finite and unchanging, became a trap. Without the genetic diversity of natural reproduction, recessive flaws, brittle bones, weakened immunity, neural instability proliferated. Hybrids like Lyrian, unintended products of rare natural conceptions, showed unstable traits. Her mixed fur, her heightened sensitivity, a sign the system was buckling. The incubators recycled the same flawed code, a genetic noose tightening with each generation. Data from Kylan's archives showed a 50% rise in congenital defects over a century, a silent countdown to extinction. Emotional suppression, neural implants, mandatory for all beastkin, were the second wound. Designed to curb primal instincts and sharpen logic, they targeted the brain's limbic system, dulling fear, joy, desire. Kaeldar's stoic commands, Silvara's measured diplomacy, Lyrian's quiet uncertainty, all were shaped by these implants, their emotions reduced to shadows. This suppression crippled adaptability. Emotions drive resilience, bonding, innovation, but the beastkin's young, raised in sterile chambers, lacked even the echo of connection. Studies, suppressed by clan elders, revealed elevated cortisol in newborns, their neural pathways stunted by isolation. The implants, meant to unify a volatile species, had instead bred fragility, leaving the beastkin unable to cope with their own decline. Kael'thar's rare flashes of anger, Silvara's fleeting warmth, cracks in their programming, hinted at what was lost. Cultural decay. The final blow was the erosion of culture. Varathus's clans once thrived on rituals. Wolf clan house ceremonies under plasma skies, Phoenix clan fire dances sparking pair bonds, Dragon clan wind chants weaving clan unity. These weren't mere traditions, they were biological triggers, releasing oxytocin and dopamine, strengthening offspring and communities. When incubators replaced mating, rituals were deemed obsolete. The clans abandoned their songs, their dances, their touch. Lyrian, a hybrid, had no rituals to claim her, no stories to anchor her identity. The clans, once bound by passion, now fought over dwindling resources, their society a sterile machine. Kylan's archives held fragments of old songs, but none sang them. The beastkin had forgotten how to live, and their children paid the price. Kael'thar rose, his armor creaking, his amber eyes sweeping the room. "You speak of genes, of machines," he said, voice low, almost a snarl. "But what of us? Are we so broken we cannot act?" He stepped closer to Silvara, his fur brushing her shoulder, a rare proximity that made her breath catch. His gaze lingered on her, a storm of duty and suppressed longing, his tail stilling as if afraid to betray more. Silvara met his eyes, her amethyst gaze softening for a moment before hardening. "We are bound by what we've made," she said, her voice a whisper that carried. "But perhaps we must unmake it." Her fingers traced the table's edge, pausing near Lyrian's hand, a hesitant reach that stopped short. The gesture, small but raw, drew Lyrian's gaze, her ears quivering as if sensing her mother's unspoken plea. Lyrian stepped forward, her cloak falling open, revealing her hybrid fur. "I feel something," she said, voice stronger now, though her hands trembled. "In the nurseries, I want to hold them. Is that wrong?" Her eyes locked on Kael'thar's, then Silvara's, a challenge wrapped in vulnerability. The room stilled, the elder's logic faltering under her words. The air grew heavy, charged with the royal's unspoken desires, to connect, to feel, to save what remained. Kael'thar's claws dug into the table, his gaze flicking to Silvara, then Lyrian, as if seeing them anew. Silvara's ears drooped, her fingers tightening on her robes, her composure fraying. Lyrian's breath quickened, her hybrid eyes bright with a need she couldn't name. A Dragon clan elder broke the silence, voice sharp. "Deactivating implants risks anarchy. Our instincts, unleashed, could tear us apart." Kael'thar's tail lashed again. "And this sterile death is better?" He turned, his gaze sweeping the sigils above, then back to his family. "We are beastkin. We were born of fire and storm. We will not end in silence." The council adjourned, no solution found, the beastkin's fate a shadow over them all. But in the glances shared, the touches that lingered, a spark flickered, a fragile hope that their buried instincts might yet save them. The albatross, 9 screamed through Varathus's orbit, its hull scorched by plasma storms, engines spitting sparks like a dying star. Inside, Jim, Carver wrestled with the controls, his salt and pepper hair damp with sweat, blue eyes locked on the flickering console. "Hold together, girl," he muttered, voice gravelly, as the ship shuddered, caught in Kylan Station-S tractor beam. A final jolt sent him sprawling, darkness swallowing him as the ship slammed into the station's docking bay. He woke to cold metal beneath him, the sterile hum of machinery in his ears. His wrists were bound by plasma cuffs, their faint glow casting shadows on his weathered face. The laboratory was a cavern of sleek alloy, lined with incubation pods, pulsing with bioluminescent fluid. Above, a viewing platform held 3 figures. King Kael'thar, his silver-white fur taut, amber eyes piercing. Queen Silvara, crimson fur shimmering, amethyst eyes unreadable, and Princess Lyrian, cloaked, her gold-violet gaze wide with curiosity. Their presence, regal yet strained, filled the room with a weight Jim couldn't name. A tortoise clan scientist, her shell gleaming under the lights, approached, her voice clipped. Human, designation James Carver. Your biology is unique. No neural implants, no genetic tampering. Your species retains natural reproductive capacity. She gestured to a hologram, a human DNA helix beside a fraying beastkin strand. Our kind is dying. You may be our salvation. Jim's jaw tightened, his medic's mind racing. Salvation how? He asked, voice steady despite the cuffs. His eyes flicked to Kaeldar, whose tail flicked sharply, then to Silvara, whose ears twitched as she leaned forward. The scientist's claws tapped a console, projecting data, fertility rates plummeting, incubator failures spiking. Our biomechanical reproduction lacks diversity. Natural mating, extinct among us, may restore it. Your human physiology, unmodified, adaptive, could trigger viable offspring. We propose an experiment. Pair you with a beastkin to test natural conception. The words hung heavy, a spark in the sterile air. Jim's breath caught, his gaze darting to Lyrian, whose cloak slipped, revealing her hybrid fur. Her eyes met his, wide and trembling, a flush creeping beneath her fur. Kaeldar stepped forward, his armor creaking, a low growl rumbling in his chest. You dare suggest this, outsider, he said, voice thick, his amber eyes locking on Jim with an intensity that felt almost physical. His clawed hand brushed the railing, inches from Silvara's, the proximity charged. Silvara's voice cut through, soft but sharp. If it saves our kind, we must consider it. Her gaze lingered on Jim, her ears quivering as if attuned to his heartbeat. She stepped closer to the platform's edge, her robes clinging to her lithe frame, her fingers grazing Kaeldar's arm, a touch that made him stiffen, his tail stilling. What say you, human? Would you help us? Jim shifted, the cuffs chafing his wrists. As a combat medic, he'd saved lives in war zones, stitched wounds under fire, but this was uncharted. You're asking me to be a lab rat, he said, voice low, meeting Silvara's gaze. I need more than data. Why me? Why now? His eyes flicked to Lyrian, her breath quickening, then back to Kaeldar, whose claws dug into the railing. The scientist interjected, her tone clinical. Your emotional capacity, unrestrained by implants, may activate dormant instincts in our kind. Hormonal triggers, lost to us, could stabilize our offspring. We'd start with tests, blood, pheromones, neural scans. If successful, pairing. She hesitated, glancing at Lyrian, then Silvara. The princess, as a hybrid, or the queen, with her phoenix lineage, are viable candidates. Lyrian gasped, her cloak falling further, her hybrid fur catching the light. Me, she whispered, her voice a mix of fear and curiosity. Her eyes locked on Jim, her fingers trembling as she clutched the railing, her body leaning forward as if drawn to him. Kaeldar's growl deepened, his amber eyes flashing between Jim and his daughter, his fur bristling with a possessive edge. Silvara's hand tightened on Kaeldar's arm, her touch lingering, her amethyst eyes softening as they met Jim's. This is not a command, she said, voice almost a whisper. But our kind is desperate. You feel things we've forgotten. Her gaze held his, a silent plea wrapped in regal poise, her ears drooping slightly. Jim's mind spun. He'd faced death, but this, being the key to a species' survival, his humanity a catalyst, felt heavier. His medic's instincts urged him to help, but the intimacy of their proposal, the way Lyrian's eyes searched his, the way Silvara's touch lingered on Kaeldar, stirred something deeper. I'll do the tests, he said finally, voice steady. But no promises. And I want these cuffs off. Kaeldar's tail lashed, but he nodded to the scientist, who deactivated the cuffs. Jim rubbed his wrists, his gaze meeting Kaeldar's, a challenge in his blue eyes. The king stepped closer, his fur brushing Jim's arm as he leaned in, voice low. You'll be watched, human. Every move. The The words were a warning, but the proximity, the heat of his breath, felt like something more. The scientist led Jim to a scanning pod, her claws clicking. As he stepped inside, Lyrian's gaze followed, her breath hitching. Silvara's fingers lingered on Kael'thar's arm, her eyes never leaving Jim. The laboratory hummed, but the real pulse was in the unspoken desires, the fragile hope that this human might rekindle what the beastkin had lost. The laboratory on Kylan Station buzzed with quiet urgency, its incubation pods glowing faintly under plasma lights. Jim Carver stood by a scanning pod, his weathered hands gripping its edge. Blue eyes narrowed as the Tortoise Clan scientist presented her findings. A hologram flickered, a chemical map of Jim's sweat, its pheromone markers pulsing red against a beastkin hormonal profile. Your perspiration, the scientist said, her shell glinting, contains compounds that activate dormant reproductive pathways in our kind. A single exposure increased Lyrian's oxytocin levels by 40%. Jim's jaw tightened, his medic's mind parsing the data. You're saying my sweat wakes them up? His gaze flicked to Princess Lyrian, standing across the room, her red-white hybrid fur partially hidden by her cloak, gold-violet eyes wide with unease. Her ears twitched, betraying a tremor she couldn't hide. King Kael'thar loomed on the viewing platform, silver-white fur bristling, amber eyes locked on Jim with a mix of suspicion and desperation. Explain, he growled, claws scraping the railing. Queen Silvara, crimson fur shimmering, stood beside him, her amethyst eyes softening as they met Jim's, her rabbit-like ears quivering. This could save us, she said, voice low, her fingers brushing Kael'thar's arm. A touch that lingered, charged with unspoken tension. The scientist nodded. Natural reproduction requires instinctual triggers, lost to our implants. Your pheromones, human, mimic those triggers. We propose a controlled experiment. Place you and the princess in a sealed chamber, monitor hormonal responses. No direct contact required, initially. Her gaze flicked to Lyrian, then Jim. Proximity may suffice. Lyrian's breath hitched, her cloak slipping to reveal more of her hybrid fur. Me alone with him? Her voice trembled, her eyes darting to Jim, then her parents. Kael'thar's tail lashed, his growl deepening. She is my daughter, he said, stepping closer to the platform's edge, his fur brushing Silvara's. You ask too much. Silvara's hand tightened on his arm, her gaze steady. We ask for hope, Kael'thar. Her eyes met Jim's, a silent plea. Will you consent, human? Jim rubbed the back of his neck, sweat beading under the lab's lights. As a combat medic, he'd faced ethical dilemmas, triage in war zones, experimental treatments, but this felt different. Lyrian's vulnerability, the beastkin's desperation, weighed heavy. I'll do it, he said, voice steady, meeting Lyrian's gaze. But she decides how far this goes. Not you, not the machines. The chamber was a small, circular room, its walls smooth alloy, lit by soft plasma glow. A single bench sat at its center, flanked by sensors embedded in the floor. Jim stepped inside, his boots echoing, followed by Lyrian, her cloak discarded, her hybrid fur catching the light. The door sealed with a hiss, leaving them alone, though Jim knew the royals and scientists watched through hidden panels. Lyrian stood by the bench, her ears drooping, fingers twisting together. I don't know what to feel, she whispered, her gold-violet eyes meeting his, bright with uncertainty. You're so alive. It scares me. Her breath quickened, her fur rippling as if responding to an unseen pull. Jim kept his distance, leaning against the wall, his blue eyes gentle but wary. You don't have to do anything, he said, voice low, a medic's calm. Just be here. Tell me what you want. He wiped his brow, sweat glistening, and Lyrian's nose twitched, her pupils dilating slightly. The air grew heavy, charged with an unspoken current. She stepped closer, hesitant, her ears quivering. I feel warm, she said, voice barely audible, her hand hovering near his arm, not touching but close enough to feel his heat. Is this what they lost? Her eyes searched his, a mix of fear and curiosity, her breath catching as she inhaled, her body swaying slightly. Jim's pulse quickened, his medic's instincts clashing with the intimacy of the moment. "Maybe," he said, voice husky, holding her gaze. "But it's your choice, Lyrian. Always." He stayed still, letting her decide. Though the space between them felt electric, her proximity stirring something primal in him too. Outside, Kael'thar's claws dug into the platform, his amber eyes fixed on the chamber, his fur bristling as Silvara's hand rested on his shoulder, her touch both calming and fraught. "She's strong," Silvara whispered, her amethyst eyes on Lyrian, then Jim, a flicker of envy in her gaze. The sensors beeped, data streaming, Lyrian's hormones spiking, her implants faltering under the human's influence. Lyrian took another step, her fingers brushing Jim's sleeve, a feather-light touch that sent a jolt through them both. "I want to understand," she said, her voice trembling, her eyes never leaving his. The chamber hummed, but the true pulse was theirs, two beings, human and beastkin, teetering on the edge of a discovery that could change everything. The sealed chamber on Kylan Station was a cocoon of alloy and plasma glow, its sensors humming like a distant heartbeat. Jim Carver leaned against the wall, his weathered frame tense, blue eyes locked on Princess Lyrian across the room. Her red-white hybrid fur caught the light, her cloak discarded, gold-violet eyes wide with a storm of emotions she couldn't name. The air was thick, charged with the invisible pull of Jim's pheromones, his sweat a catalyst stirring instincts long buried in her beastkin blood. Lyrian's body burned, a fever that pulsed from her core, her fur rippling as if stroked by an unseen hand. Her breath came in shallow gasps, her ears quivering, a deep ache blooming within, a primal urge she didn't understand. "It's too much," she whispered, her voice trembling, her fingers clutching the bench's edge. Her thighs pressed together, a flush creeping beneath her fur, her pupils dilating as she inhaled Jim's scent, sharp and intoxicating. She looked to him, lost, her gaze a plea for guidance. Jim's pulse raced, his medic's calm fraying under her stare. "Easy, Lyrian," he said, voice husky, stepping closer but stopping short, hands raised to show restraint. "Tell me what you're feeling." His own body betrayed him, sweat beading on his brow, his chest tight with a heat he couldn't ignore. Her vulnerability, her raw need, tugged at something deep within him, a protector's instinct, a man's desire. From a viewing platform, the Tortoise Clan scientist's voice crackled through a hidden speaker, clinical yet urgent. "Proximity isn't enough. Physical contact is required. Use your hands, touch her." The words were a spark in dry grass, igniting the air. Lyrian's eyes widened, her breath hitching. "Touch me," she echoed, her voice a mix of fear and yearning, her body swaying toward Jim as if drawn by gravity. King Kael'thar, watching above, slammed a clawed fist on the railing, his silver-white fur bristling, amber eyes blazing. "This is madness," he growled, but his voice cracked, his tail stiffening as Silvara's hand rested on his shoulder, her crimson fur shimmering, amethyst eyes fixed on the chamber with a flicker of envy. Silvara's fingers tightened, her voice soft but resolute. "It's our only hope." Her gaze lingered on Jim, then Lyrian, her ears drooping as if mourning her own lost instincts. Her touch on Kael'thar lingered, a silent ache in the space between them. Jim met Lyrian's gaze, his blue eyes steady despite the fire in his veins. "Only if you want this," he said, voice low, offering her control. She nodded, a small, trembling motion, her fur rippling as she stepped closer, the space between them shrinking to a breath. Her hand reached out, hesitant, fingers grazing his arm, a feather-light touch that sent a jolt through them both, her gasp echoing his own. Her skin was warm, her fur soft, and the contact unleashed a flood. Lyrian's body arched slightly, her breath ragged, the ache within swelling into a tide she couldn't contain. "It's alive," she murmured, her fingers tightening on his arm, her eyes locked on his, bright with wonder and need. Jim's hand moved, slow and deliberate, resting on her shoulder, his thumb brushing her fur, each motion a question, an answer. The chamber's sensors beeped wildly, data streaming, her hormones spiking, her implants faltering, her body awakening. More, the scientist's voice urged, a distant command. Explore the connection. Kael'thar's growl deepened, his claws digging into the railing. But he didn't look away, his amber eyes torn between fury and fascination. Silvara's breath caught, her hand sliding down Kael'thar's arm, her touch a mirror of the chamber's intensity. Lyrian's fingers trailed up Jim's arm, her touch bolder, her body pressing closer, the heat between them a living thing. "I want this," she whispered, her voice a thread of courage, her gold-violet eyes burning into his. Jim's hand slid to her waist, steadying her, his breath warm against her ear as he murmured, "Then let it happen." The words were a spark, and the world narrowed to their shared pulse, their trembling breaths, the unspoken promise in their touch. The chamber's lights dimmed, or perhaps it was their senses drowning in each other. Their movements became a dance, slow, deliberate, then urgent, a tangle of need and discovery. Her fur against his skin, his hands guiding, her gasps a melody. They flowed together, a tide cresting in silence. The sensor screamed, then fell quiet, as if respecting the moment. Outside, Kael'thar's fist unclenched, his gaze dropping, while Silvara's eyes closed, a single tear tracing her fur. What passed between Jim and Lyrian was a flame, consuming yet unseen, its embers left for the heart to decipher. The chamber door remained sealed, the world beyond holding its breath as two souls, one human, one beastkin, crossed a threshold that might save a species or break it. The sealed chamber on Kylan Station had become a sanctuary, its alloy walls and plasma glow a silent witness to a quiet revolution. James, Jim, Carver, and Princess Lyrian stood at its heart, no longer strangers but bound by a thread that wove through their every glance, every touch. The air hummed with the memory of their first encounter, when Jim's pheromones had awakened Lyrian's dormant instincts, her hybrid fur trembling under his gaze. Now, weeks later, that spark had grown into a flame, tended in stolen moments, each meeting a dance of whispers and shadows, their connection a tide that rose and fell in silence. Lyrian's gold-violet eyes met Jim's, her red-white fur soft under the light, her breath steady but laced with a warmth that spoke of countless nights. Their closeness was a language of its own, his hand brushing her shoulder, her fingers tracing his wrist, their bodies finding every way to speak without words. Each encounter was a constellation, a map of discovery drawn in fleeting touches and shared breaths, their forms merging like rivers finding the sea. The chamber's sensors, once frantic, now recorded a rhythm, her hormones steady, her implants quiet, her body alive in ways the beastkin had forgotten. Outside, the royal court buzzed with whispers. King Kael'thar's amber eyes, once fierce with suspicion, softened with a reluctant hope, his silver-white fur still bristling when Jim passed too close to Lyrian. Queen Silvara, her crimson fur aglow, watched with a mix of pride and longing, her amethyst eyes lingering on the couple, her rabbit-like ears catching the echo of their shared pulse. The Tortoise Clan scientists, their shells gleaming, pored over data, Lyrian's biology shifting, her hybrid nature no longer a flaw but a bridge. One dawn, in the chamber's quiet, Lyrian's hand pressed to her abdomen, a subtle curve beneath her fur. "Jim," she whispered, voice trembling with wonder, "it's real." Her eyes searched his, bright with a truth that needed no words. Jim's breath caught, his medic's mind racing. Human and beastkin, a union thought impossible, now a spark of life. He stepped closer, his hand covering hers, their fingers entwining like roots of a new world. "We did this," he murmured, voice husky, his blue eyes reflecting her hope. The news rippled through Kylan Station, a wave breaking centuries of despair. Lyrian, carrying a child, was a beacon, the first natural conception in generations, proof that instinct could triumph over machines. The clans, once divided, gathered in the council chamber, their sigils glowing: wolf, phoenix, dragon, tortoise. Kaeldar stood tall, his voice a low thunder. This human has given us more than we dare dream. His gaze met Jim's, a nod of respect, though his tail flicked, a shadow of his old protectiveness. Silvara's hand found Kaeldar's, her touch a quiet vow. "She is our future," she said, her eyes on Lyrian, then Jim, a tear tracing her fur. "And he is hers." The words were a blessing, a release of her own buried desires, her crimson fur shimmering as she stepped back, letting her daughter shine. In a ceremony under plasma skies, Jim and Lyrian were bound, not by chains but by choice. Her fur gleamed, his weathered hand steady as they faced the clans, their union a tapestry of human and beastkin. The vows were simple, spoken in whispers, but their weight reshaped Varathis. Jim, once a stranger, was now a cornerstone, his medic's heart and human fire a catalyst for renewal. He stood before the council, voice steady. "Earth can help," he said, blue eyes bright. "Humans, our resilience, our passion, can join you. Together, we'll rebuild." The clans murmured, some wary, others eager, but Lyrian's hand in his was a promise that carried them forward. Ships were planned, signals sent to distant stars, a call for those willing to forge a new world. As Lyrian's belly grew, so did Varathis's hope. The incubators slowed, their hum fading as rituals returned. Howls, dances, songs under jagged peaks. The child, yet unborn, was a symbol, a new era, where instinct and love could heal a dying planet. Jim and Lyrian, side by side, faced the horizon, their bond a flame that would light the way for generations, its embers glowing in every heart that dared to feel.